And yeah, welcome everybody, and hello anybody that's checking us out on YouTube Live. I am Ben. This is Armando. We are with Tamron, and today we are going to, as advertised, do a kind of an introduction to the new 28-200 all-in-one lens for the Sony Mirrorless system, and then a little kind of expanded discussion on everything that Tamron's been putting out for. Again, for the Sony Mirrorless system. We have 7 lenses now in the lineup. All of them reviews have been spectacular. We couldn't be happier with them. So if you are a Sony shooter and you are in the market, hopefully you'll check out the Tamron lenses if you haven't already, and there's a good chance, I'm guessing that many of you even own one, which would be likely the 2875. It's been incredibly popular. So without further ado, though, I'm going to kick things over to Armando. And for those of us that are hanging out in Zoom, I will be in the chat room for any questions. I'll try to answer your questions there. Anything I can't answer, we'll put to Armando at the end. So without further ado, Mr. Flores, teach us everything you know about the new Tamron lens line.
Oh, that'll take about 5 minutes. No. Okay, so my name is Armando Flores, and I am a national tech rep for Tamron USA. Have been for about 6 years now, a little over 6 years. Before then, I actually worked for Sony. I was a Sony rep for about 5 years. And before Sony, I was a rep for Nikon, and I spent about 22 years at Nikon. So I've been repping for, some time now. And, all that changes is just, the name on the shirt here. The tech rep or the rep industry is actually pretty small. There's a small group of people. We all know each other and have for many, many years. So, they see me a few years later at an event and say, hey, so what are you up to? And then they see the name on the shirt has changed. They say, don't worry about it. I'm working my way up the alphabet. So anyway, but I'm here today to talk about the Tamron Sony mirrorless lens lineup. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the history of mirrorless cameras. Well, the acronyms have changed quite a bit. They started out as the MILC camera, then it reverted to the DSLM, and then at one point it even took the name of the EVIL or the EVIL camera. But these cameras are basically mirrorless cameras. The companies have done away with the mirror box, and what they've done is they've thrown in an electronic viewfinder. The very first camera of this category to come out was introduced in 2008 by Panasonic, then shortly followed by Olympus with their model. Those cameras were based on a micro four thirds sensor. So they call it a micro four thirds because of the aspect ratio. It is a small sensor, but it is a 4:3 aspect ratio. Then the APS-C size sensors cameras, the mirrorless camera, showed up in 2010. The first model by Samsung, and then shortly followed by 2 models by Sony, the NEX3, then the NEX5. But mirrorless cameras have, in the past 4 or 5 years, have really gained ground. They're taking off. The whole idea behind a mirrorless camera is that the camera body itself is smaller, it's lighter, it's more compact, but you really don't sacrifice anything when it comes to the image quality. Now, in the case of micro four thirds, that is a much smaller sensor, but that's a different animal. For the most part, we're going to be talking about either the APS-C size sensor mirrorless cameras, and for the most part, the full frame mirrorless cameras. So Tamron decided to jump into the mix a few years back, and we currently have 7 lenses for the Sony mirrorless cameras. And as of today, in fact, as of yesterday, there are 7. The new lens, the 28 to 200, was introduced, or not introduced, but it was released yesterday. Now, all of these lenses are fast. They have a 2.8 maximum aperture. They are compact. They are lightweight. They all feature a 67 millimeter front end filter size. Now, the whole idea behind a mirrorless camera or a mirrorless system is that you want to do away with a lot of the weight. Perhaps you are in a situation where you have to do a lot of traveling, a lot of walking, a lot of hiking. You don't want to carry a big DSLR camera. You want to keep it nice and small and compact. So that is where the mirrorless market is. And surprisingly enough, if you look at some of the lenses offered by, the camera manufacturers, from Sony, from Nikon for their mirrorless system, the Z, and from Canon for their mirrorless system, the R, they do offer very fast lenses, 24 to 70, 70 to 200. But the interesting thing is that those lenses are big and they're heavy. In fact, they're no smaller than a traditional DSLR lenses. So what Tamron wanted to do is, if we're going to jump into the bandwagon here, we want to do it right. We want to design a lens that's smaller and more portable than the competition has to offer. So first, we introduced 2 lenses, and the very first lenses that we introduced were the 28 to 75, and then the 28 to the 28 to 75, and then the 17 to 28. The very first lens to come out was the 28 to 75, and that lens quickly became the fastest selling zoom in Tamron's history. So we sold more copies of this 28 to 75 than we ever had of any lens, period. In a period of 1 year, we sold more than we had ever, again, in any, from any other model. Now, these lenses have been available for quite some time, a couple years now, and these lenses are, readily available. The 17 to 28 using an RXD motor. This motor is a small, compact, very fast focusing, and very quiet motor. So ideal for those video shooters out there. Selling price of this lens is $899. The 28 to 75 is $875. Now, the interesting thing about all of the lenses that Tamron has been designing and coming out with is that these lenses are designed from the ground up. These lenses are not a retrofit. So in other words, we don't take an existing lens and simply mount the lens adapter portion, to the back of the lens to make it fit on the camera. If you're familiar with that lens adapter, what happens is that a traditional DSLR camera has a flange back distance that is pretty big. In other words, from where the chip resides in the back of the camera to where the lens mounts, that's a very specific distance. And for example, some of the Nikons, it's somewhere around the 40 plus millimeter range. So that is a pretty thick camera body. The mirrorless cameras, what they do is they take the mirror box out to shorten that distance a lot more. By doing so, obviously the cameras get smaller, they get lighter, but the lens designs open up because the flange back distance is so short. In the case of the Sony, 18.1 millimeters, I think, you're able to design lenses that you normally couldn't for a camera with a much greater flange back distance. So very important to know that these lenses are designed specifically for the Sony E-Mount based on that flange back distance. So these lenses are ideal for many, many uses. In other words, a 17 to 28, I have used this many times in night sky photography situations. So for photographing the Milky Way and things of that nature, it's an excellent lens. It's a 2.8 maximum aperture, which is one of the things that you need when you're doing night sky photography. Also, great for landscape, and I have taken it out in occasions, and I've done street photography with that lens. So pretty flexible lens, nice lens for the Edition. And the 28 to 75, this is a nice standard zoom. In other words, for everyday life type of photography, I would say that somewhere around 70% of the photography situations, you're going to be somewhere within this focal range. So this is what we consider a standard zoom lens. And every manufacturer offers a lens of this type, 24-70 mostly, for the most part. And one thing that I do have to note that is that Tamron is a lens manufacturer, and as a lens manufacturer, Tamron has won more awards than all of the other camera manufacturers combined. The 28 to 75 and the 17 to 28, both award-winning lenses, and that keeps growing. What we've also done is we've also came out with a line of prime lenses. Now these lenses are small, they're compact, they're ideal for the photographer or the shooter who wants to carry something smaller. So we've introduced, and the lenses are already available, have been for since last year, I believe. We announced the 20 millimeter, the 24 millimeter, the 35 millimeter. All of these lenses have a maximum aperture of 2.8. And what's interesting about these lenses is that they all share the same outer shell. The concept behind that is that if you make one outer shell for all the lenses and just simply change the internals, it keeps the cost down. So those savings are passed on over to the consumer, which is not a bad thing. These lenses all have a very good and extremely close minimum object distance or minimum focusing distance, depending on how you like to hear those terms. But these lenses, for example, the 20 millimeter, and weighs about 7.8 ounces, and has a reproduction ratio, because of that minimum focusing distance, of 1 to 2. So what that means is that whatever object you're photographing up close will be rendered half its life size onto the sensor. So yes, very macro-ish, very close to a macro lens. Now, a true macro lens will render your object at a 1-to-1 reproduction ratio. So that means that your object will be life size on the sensor. But with a 1-to-2 reproduction ratio, it is very easy to get to a 1-to-1. All you need to do is add a couple of extension tubes and you're there. So once again, small, compact, and lightweight. These lenses are also moisture resistant and constructed with fluorine coatings so that they repel moisture, dust, and debris from the front element. Usually, if you've put a fingerprint on the front of your lens, you have to get a lens cloth with some cleaning solution to be able to wipe that greasy fingerprint off. But with a fluorine coating, all you need is a lens cloth and it wipes right off. So very easy to do. So let's take a look at the 35 millimeter. Now, the interesting thing about the 35 millimeter is its lens hood. The lens hood was designed in a way to keep the size of the lens smaller and more compact. So usually lenses that are wide angle or wide angle zooms would have what they call a cauliflower style of lens hood. This particular lens, however, what they've done is they've implemented the hood inside the barrel of the lens pretty much, and it still has a 67 millimeter thread on the outside. So interesting concept, keeps the lens smaller and more compact. Prime lenses are excellent for when you're out and about or when you're out traveling. 20 millimeter, excellent for landscape, low light photography. With the minimum object distance of all of the prime lenses, you're able to get very, very close. So in this case, with the 24, we're at 4.7 inches. And this lens is able to render you your subject at a 1:2 reproduction ratio. So once again, half life size. These lenses are ideal for everyday life or when traveling. So if you haven't tried a prime lens, lately, I do recommend it. These lenses, a prime lens, they make you work a little bit more. They make you think about your photography just a little bit more because they are a fixed focal length. So you become the zoom. So now you have to physically move in and out and compose your image, just a little bit more. So they make you think a little bit more about photography, kind of like mounting your camera on a tripod. It slows you down a little bit and it makes you do a little bit more work. Now, these lenses, because of their unibody design, they come in at a very good price. So currently those lenses are available for $349 before the rebate, and there's usually an instant rebate on the lenses, so it brings the price down to $299, so right under $300. Now, once again, the reproduction ratio of all of these lenses is half life size. Which brings us to the 70 to 180. Now, this lens was released last year, and when it was released, it finally filled that gap. It completed the trilogy for the zoom lenses. And as you know, the trilogy of zoom lenses is 24 to 70 or somewhere thereabouts, a 17 to 28. So you've got an ultra wide, you've got a standard telephoto, and then you have a mid-range telephoto lens. One thing that I've noticed with all my years in the industry is that with every professional photographer that I've encountered, whether they're photojournalists, sports photographers, portrait, landscape, whatever type of photography they do, there's a commonality with their equipment, and that is in lenses, and that is in the trilogy of lenses. So everyone's going to have either a 16 to 35 if they're a Canon guy, or if they're a Nikon guy, they're going to have a 14 to 24. If they're a Tamron lens shooter, they're going to have a 15 to 30. So they're going to have an ultra wide. They're going to have a standard zoom lens, whether it's a 24 to 70, or in the case of the Sony Mirrorless, a 28 to 75. And they're all going to have a 70 to 200. And in this case, with the Sony lineup, a 70 to 180. All lenses are 2.8. So about 85 to 90% of your picture taking situations will happen with those three lenses. So that's why they consider these lenses the trilogy lenses. Now you may ask yourself, well, why did they decide on a 70 to 180 rather than a 70 to 200? It's only 20 millimeters off the top end. Well, by going to a 180 instead of 200, we're able to keep the lens about 25% smaller and also much lighter, but there is no sacrifice in image quality or in the speed of the lens. Same thing with the 28 to 75. Because it starts at 28 and it goes to 75, we're able to make the lens much smaller than a 24 to 70 would. So that is Tamron's logic behind the oddly numbered focal ranges. One thing that is very important anytime you look at a design of a lens, what you want to look at is the amount of elements that lens has and the amount of groups. But most importantly is what are those lens groups, what do they consist of? So here you have molded glass aspherical lens elements. Now those a molded glass aspherical lens element in its design usually takes the place of 2 or 3 other elements. So it's very difficult to design a lens like this, a glass element like this, but it keeps the weight of the lens down, dramatically. Then you have your hybrid aspherical lens elements, and once again, those lenses play pretty much that same role. They are able to replace 1 or 2 other lens elements, once again, enabling the manufacturer to keep the size and cost down. Then you have your LD glass and your XLD glass. Now, these are very very high-end, very high quality. These lens elements are designed to correct for any aberration that might occur. So the more LD and XLD lens elements you have in a lens formula, the sharper that lens is going to be. So here in this particular case, you've got quite a bit of LD elements. You've got, a total of 5 there, and you have 1 XLD. So the resolution of this 70 to 180 rivals the resolution of any 70 to 200 out in the market. So lenses like these are ideal for everyday picture taking situation where you want to basically pick out a subject that's out in the distance, or maybe perhaps isolate that subject from the background. With a very good MOD of 33.5 inches, you are also able to use this lens basically as like a macro lens. Once again, it doesn't give you a 1-to-1 ratio, so it's not a true macro, but it enables you to get very close to the subjects. And just yesterday, we released the new lens. That's a 28 to 200. Now, Tamron, I don't know if you know this, but is known for their all-in-one lenses. In fact, they actually created that category back in 1992. They came out with the very first all-in-one lens, and they've been working at it ever since. Currently for the DSLR cameras, there's a 28 to 300 for full frame. There's a 16 to 300 for crop sensor. And lately, the last one to come out was an 18 to 400 for the APS-C size sensor DSLR shooters. However, we've now focused on Sony Mirrorless and introduced the 28 to 200. Now, if you can answer yes to any of these questions, basically you want a lighter, setup when you go out to shoot. Whether you're going to walk a long distance, you want to carry maybe perhaps just 1 lens. If you are relegated to a physical size of a bag that you can pack, or weight, sometimes when you travel overseas, that is the case, and you can't take a lot of equipment. If you are just starting in photography and really don't know where you want to be or which way you want to head photography-wise, an all-in-one lens is the way to go. That is where you want to start. So if you, again, answer yes to any one of these questions, then I think you should look at that 28 to 200. I just received my copy, about a week and a half ago, and I've been playing with it. And I can tell you right now, just from the 2 or 3 times that I've taken it out, it is definitely going to go and stay in my camera bag. So everywhere I go, I know I will carry this lens. Once again, if you are just starting in photography and you really don't know where you're going to end up, because, my career, I studied photojournalism in college. I never practiced it because when I was going to college, I got hired by Nikon to be a rep. But quickly, right after I started with Nikon, my photography went to sports photography. I did sports photography professionally for 17 years at Nikon. And then I migrated to event photography with Sony. I did a little more traveling. So it was travel photography with Tamron. We cover 49 states. I speak Spanish, so I also cover 4 countries. So I spend a lot of time in the air. And lately, I've been doing a lot of landscape and a lot of street photography. So this lens plays well with just about every type of photography you can think of. It is the world's first super zoom that starts at 2.8. Before, the lenses would start either at f4 or even 3.5, but this particular lens starts at 2.8, and it stays 2.8 till you get to very close to 50 millimeters. And then obviously, as the lens gets longer, light is now traveling further, so the aperture is going to vary. But at the very high end of the magnification at 200 millimeters, you are at 5.6, so still pretty usable. So this is a pretty exceptional lens. Once again, I've only had just a few opportunities to use it, but I do plan to keep it in my bag. This lens has a very high resolving power. The lens formula is pretty out there. So once again, as technology improves with the cameras, so does lens technology have to improve. You're looking at cameras that give you over 60 megapixels now. So any lens that the manufacturers come up with now have to give you an equal resolving power. So these lenses are sharper than anything that you could have had when Tamron came out with their first one back in '92. So once again, just like the rest of the lens lineup, this lens is, lightweight at 20.3 ounces. It's very compact. It's only 4.6 inches. So that's about 4.5 inches. It's right about the size of the 28 to 75 and only about an eighth of an inch taller than the 17 to 28. So those three lenses, in a camera bag would not take up a lot of room. And an RXD motor. So once again, they've implemented that very lightweight, very fast, very quiet focusing motor. Yes, and they've also, kept that 62 millimeter front end diameter. So same filter size throughout the Sony lineup, which is actually pretty cool, pretty ideal, especially with accessories. So for example, if you start buying filters, like a polarizer or a neutral density, it is the same filter diameter throughout all of the 7 lenses. And as you know, if you've ever purchased one of these filters, the good ones at least, can get up there in price. A circular polarizing filter could run you in, a couple $100. So, it's nice to have a a lens system with the same, filter thread. And once again, the lens formula for this lens is, pretty out there as well. So you've got 18 elements in 14 groups. And as you can see with the formula here, you've got, LD glass, you have XLD glass, you have your hybrid lens elements, and your molded glass elements, which enable Tamron to keep the size and the weight and, and the cost down. And once again, because of the lens design and because of the lens elements that are implemented into the barrel and the body of this lens, the MTF performance is pretty good. Right here, you have a comparison to the closest thing, which is a Sony 24 to 240. That is a 3.5 to 6.3 lens. But as you can see with the MTF charts, this lens has a bit more resolving power. So it's going to be a little bit sharper. When it comes to lens design, Tamron really doesn't compromise a lot because we are a lens manufacturer. We don't manufacture camera bodies. We don't manufacture strobes. We concentrate on lenses, period. And we have since the since 1950. So that's all we do. And Tamron does it very well. So you get a lot of bang for the buck. Now, once again, very sharp, even at the very high magnification. This lens focuses down to 7.5 inches, and therefore at 28 millimeters, you're going to get a magnification ratio of 1 to 3.1, which is about a third life size. So not bad for an all-in-one lens that goes from 28 to 300. And here we have a size comparison to the 24 to 240 Sony. As you can see, they're pretty much right about the same size. However, the Tamron lens, the 28 to 200, is lighter, and obviously it is faster. Okay, so it doesn't go to 24. It starts at 28, but once again, you decide whether a 2.8 start versus a 3.5 will make a difference for you. So again, once again, just, a lens designed from the ground up, specifically for photo enthusiasts, people who are just getting started, people who travel a lot and simply want to take one lens and not take, a slew of lenses or a whole camera bag. Excellent focal range for just about everything. Ideal for landscapes and excellent portrait range as well. And with the minimum object distance of 7.5 inches, you can use it for macro situations. Very fast aperture lens allows you to blur out the backgrounds just a little bit more than you normally would with a wide angle lens at, let's say, 3.5 or f4. And, again, ideal for that hiker, that traveler. And very sharp. You can see all of the fine detail with the construction of the lens. At 2.8, once again, it's ideal for those low light situations. So once again, 28 to 200, ideal for, an all-around photographer, somebody who's just getting started. And here's a quick overview of the, once again, the 28 to 200 specs. So once again, world's fastest all-in-one zoom starting at 2.8, lightweight 20.3 ounces, compact 4.6 inches. Yes, moisture resistant, fluorine coatings. So very well built. And if you get caught out in the elements, light rain, drizzle, snow, this lens will take, take all of that in stride. And once again, 67 millimeter front end. So a quick review of the Sony Tamron FE lineup. You've got your 28 to 75, your 17 to 28, 3 prime lenses, 20, 24, and 35. Your short telephoto zoom, 70 to 180, and now your all-in-one travel zoom. So once again, the prime lenses with a macro resolution of 1 to 2 or half life size, and starting at only $299. One thing you'll know about Tamron is that we do have the longest warranty in the industry, 6 years. This will cover you from any manufacturer defects. And the one thing I like about Tamron's repair service is that if you have the lens for 5.5 years or 5 years and 11 months, and you think that the lens is getting maybe a little sloppy, a little slow, or maybe perhaps you just want the lens to go back to Tamron for whatever reason, Tamron will take it in. They will repair it for you. They'll bring it back to factory specifications. Okay, cosmetically, it is going to stay the way it is. They're not going to pretty it up, but they will bring it back to specs optically and autofocus performance and anything else. And that is under warranty. That is for free. And again, 6 years. The other thing that I like about Tamron, and now once again, I used to work for Nikon and Sony. Both of those manufacturers have pro services departments. So there's MPS, there is CPS, and Sony now has their Sony Pro, support. All those are memberships that you have to apply to. And one of the services that they give you for being an MPS, CPS, or SPS member is that they give you a fast turnaround. In other words, they will repair your equipment and get it back to you as quickly as possible. Well, no one has the fastest turnaround than Tamron. We have a three-day in-house turnaround period for everyone. You don't have to be a member to be able to get that service.